Federal Courthouse, Lower Manhattan, 1975. Frank Lucas sits across from prosecutors, facing 70 years, age 45. The offer? Cooperate. Give names. Walk free eventually. Frank takes it. 1978. Same courthouse. Nicky Barnes. Mr. Untouchable. Life without parole staring him down. Same offer. Barnes takes it too. Combined, they cooperated in cases involving over 109 people. Drug dealers, corrupt cops, Italian mobsters. The Italian mafia had one code: omerta, silence. Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes shattered it. This is about two black kingpins who made millions with mafia help, then destroyed everything by becoming the biggest informants in New York history. This is about respect earned and lost, about Bumpy Johnson, who did 11 years at Alcatraz and never snitched, and Frank Matthews, who disappeared rather than cooperate, and about Hollywood turning rats into legends while real, honorable gangsters get forgotten. Detective Richie Roberts, Frank's prosecutor, was clear. Frank provided evidence that led to more than 100 arrests and convictions. Not 10, not 20, over 100. Frank's version? He only gave up corrupt cops. Noble, right? Cleaning up the NYPD. Ron Chapiziuk, Frank's own biographer, exposed it. Lucas turning in only corrupt cops is an effort by Tinseltown to soften his image. Nobody likes a snitch. He did it to save his skin. Richie Roberts confirmed. Frank snitched on dirty cops, fellow drug dealers, and even more so the mob. Even more on the mob, the Italians who'd supplied him for years. Out of 70 Special Investigations Unit officers, 52 were jailed or indicted, partly because of Frank's testimony. That's the cop angle everyone talks about. But the drug dealers, the Italian suppliers, the money launderers, the distributors, those numbers are harder to track because Frank testified in closed proceedings, grand juries, sealed indictments. What we know, Frank cooperated continuously from 1975 to 1981. 6 years of testimony, hundreds of hours on the stand, thousands of pages of depositions, every name he knew, every operation he'd seen, every connection he'd made. He emptied his entire criminal knowledge into the prosecution's lap, and they used it to destroy networks across New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Nicky Barnes, 109 people Barnes helped indict, 44 traffickers, 16 convicted. But the real number? Barnes testified in 50 murder and drug cases involving 109 people. His own council members, the 7 men he'd vowed to treat as brothers: Joseph, Jazz, Hayden Wallace, Rice Thomas, Gaps, Foreman, Ishmael, Muhammad Frank, James Guy Fisher, all convicted because Barnes identified them in open court. His wife, Thelma Grant, served 10 years because her husband testified against her. Fellow dealers who trusted him, Italian associates who'd done business with him, corrupt officials who'd protected him. Barnes wept on the witness stand, identifying them as a council who vowed to treat my brother as myself. Their lawyers scoffed. Barnes is testifying only to win parole. They were right. Barnes later admitted, being in prison for life is worse than being an informer. The betrayal wasn't just about numbers. It was about trust. These men had built an organization together, shared profits, divided territories, followed rules. The council had codes. Don't sleep with each other's women. Don't steal each other's money. Don't testify against brothers. Barnes violated the last one and brought down everyone else with him. Over 200 people arrested because 2 men couldn't do their time. Think about what that means in practical terms. 200 people arrested, maybe 150 convicted. Average sentence? 10 to 20 years. That's 1,500 to 3,000 years of collective prison time. Families destroyed, children growing up without fathers, wives becoming single mothers, careers ended, and crucially, a significant portion were connected to the Italian mafia. The mob had spent decades building relationships with black dealers, supplying heroin at wholesale prices, splitting profits, creating a system that worked for both sides. Frank and Nicky destroyed it all, not through violence, through cooperation. After Frank and Nicky, the Italian mob never trusted black dealers the same way again. Too much risk, too many potential informants. The partnership that started with Lucky Luciano and Bumpy Johnson in 1935. 40 years of cooperation, Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes ended it. In 6 years of testimony, American Gangster releases, $266 million box office, Denzel Washington as Frank Lucas, federal judge Sterling Johnson Jr., who prosecuted Frank, watched it. His verdict? The picture is 1% reality and 99% Hollywood. Frank was illiterate. Frank was vicious, violent. Frank was everything Denzel Washington was not. 1% reality, 99% fiction. Frank's signature story, smuggling heroin in coffins of dead soldiers from Vietnam. Ron Chapesiuk called it the biggest hoax in the history of the international drug trade. Leslie Ike Atkinson, Frank's actual supplier, denied it. I never used coffins. I used furniture. Frank stole my story. Even Judge Johnson admitted, everybody thought the caskets carried heroin, but it never happened. Frank later changed his story, said he only did it once. Either he lied for 30 years or he's lying now. Either way, liar. Frank claimed he drove Bumpy Johnson for 15 years. Mamie Johnson, Bumpy's widow, destroyed it. Frank maybe drove him twice. My husband never saw Frank as anything more than someone who might carry his coat. The timeline doesn't work. Bumpy was in prison 1952 to 1963, died 1968. That's 5 years maximum, not 15. Frank claimed Bumpy died in his arms. Mamie, Frank was nowhere around. All of Frank's talk is lies. The movie shows Frank only exposing corrupt NYPD. 3 DEA agents sued Universal Pictures. Their testimony? Lucas was my informant for years. He never mentioned any crooked agent. Judge Johnson confirmed, I don't know anyone who made more cases than Lucas. He gave up everyone. He even gave up his own mother. His own mother, the woman he called every day. Mark Jacobson, journalist who wrote the original article, admitted there was only one way Frank got out that fast. He sang like a canary, long and loud. Ron Chapesiuk's research proved Frank worked for the Italian mafia. Frank Lucas did not have any independent source of Asian heroin. He got his smack from La Cosa Nostra. The French connections supplied him. The Italian mafia controlled that. When Frank got caught, he gave up his suppliers, his Italian connections, everyone who'd made him rich. Barnes imprisoned at Greenhaven Correctional Facility. Heroin consumption charge. There he meets Joseph Crazy Joe Gallo, Italian mobster, Colombo family soldier. Gallo was doing time for extortion, but he wasn't idle. Prison is where mobsters network, make connections, plan futures. Barnes and Gallo bonded. Different backgrounds, same hustle. Both understood the game. When both got released, Gallo helped Barnes form his drug organization. This wasn't charity, it was business. The Italian mob saw opportunity in Barnes, a smart black dealer who could control Harlem while they stayed in the background. The arrangement? Italians supply wholesale heroin. Barnes distributes in Harlem. Both sides profit. Nobody steps on each other's territory. By 1972, Barnes had enough power and organization to formalize it. He formed the Council. 7 black men modeled directly after Italian mafia families. They even used mafia terminology: council meetings, territory divisions, profit sharing, dispute resolution. The council members swore an oath: treat my brother as myself. Meant loyalty, meant trust, meant nobody betrays anybody. The Italians watched approvingly. This was exactly what they wanted: organized black dealers who followed codes, who could be trusted, who ran Harlem efficiently. The empire Barnes built. By 1976, Barnes's network was massive. Structure: 7 lieutenants, council members. Each controlled 12 mid-level distributors. Each mid-level guy supplied 40 street dealers. Math: 7 times 12 times 40 equals 3,360 people in his organization. Over 3,000 people selling Barnes's heroin throughout New York, Pennsylvania, Canada. Net worth at peak: over $50 million. Some estimates say $100 million. Barnes lived like royalty. Multiple cars: Bentley, Citroen, Maserati, SM, Mercedes-Benz, yellow Volvo, various Cadillacs. His wardrobe: $7 million worth of tailor-made suits, Italian leather shoes, custom jewelry. He owned apartments throughout Manhattan, had girlfriends in different buildings. Threw parties celebrities attended. The Italian mob didn't care about the lifestyle, as long as Barnes paid tribute, as long as he followed the rules, as long as he kept Harlem organized. The partnership worked. Barnes made millions. The Italians made millions. Harlem's heroin trade was stable. Then Barnes got arrogant. June 5, 1977. The New York Times Magazine cover story. Headline: "This is Nicky Barnes. The police say he may be Harlem's biggest drug dealer, but can they prove it?" Full-page photo. Barnes in stylish clothes, confident smile, almost mocking. The magazine said they'd use a mugshot unless he posed. Barnes hated mugshots, made him look like a criminal, so he posed. Professional photo shoot, like he was a celebrity, not a drug kingpin. The issue hit newsstands nationwide. Barnes became famous overnight. Mr. Untouchable. President Jimmy Carter saw the cover at Camp David. According to reports, Carter was furious, called his attorney general. "I want that man prosecuted. Make him a priority." The full weight of the federal government came down on Nicky Barnes, DEA, FBI, NYPD, IRS. They built an airtight case: testimony from addicts, wiretaps, surveillance, financial records. January 19, 1978. Conviction: RICO charges, narcotics trafficking, continuing criminal enterprise. Judge: "You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. You will never be released. Life without parole." Barnes was 44 years old. Barnes went to prison expecting loyalty. The council would take care of his family, maintain his assets, pay his legal fees. They didn't. From prison, Barnes discovered his assets were being stolen by council members. They'd stopped paying his attorneys. They were sleeping with his girlfriends. They'd violated every oath they'd taken. The worst? Guy Fisher, Barnes's own council member, his supposed brother, took up with one of Barnes's girlfriends. Openly, publicly. The council had one rule about this: don't touch each other's women. Ever. Fisher violated it. The other council members let him. Barnes felt betrayed. The oath meant nothing. The brotherhood was fiction. They'd used him while he was free, abandoned him in prison. So Barnes made a decision: if they won't be loyal to me, I won't be loyal to them. Barnes approaches federal prosecutors. 4 years into his life sentence, the offer: full cooperation. He'd give up the council, testify against everyone, identify operations, expose everything. In exchange, Reduced sentence eventually. Witness protection. New identity. Freedom. March 15, 1983. Barnes testifies for the first time against Nicholas Sperling. October 1983. Barnes identifies all 5 council members in open court, one by one. Their names, their roles, their crimes. Over the next several years, Barnes cooperates in 50 murder and drug cases involving 109 people. He gave up everyone: council members, his wife, fellow dealers, Italian connections, corrupt cops, everyone who'd ever trusted him. The council's lawyers tried to discredit him, called him a liar, a coward, said he was only trying to save himself. They were right. Barnes admitted it later. Being in prison for the rest of your life is worse than being an informer. The Italian mob watched and remembered. Barnes had been their partner, their organized, trustworthy black distributor. Now he was their worst nightmare. A cooperating witness who knew too much. Normal street heroin in the 1970s, cut to 10 to 20% purity. Dealers mixed it with mannite powder, quinine, baking soda, lactose, anything white and cheap that added weight. Standard practice. Why? Economics. Buy heroin at wholesale. Cut it 5 or 10 times. Sell 5 or 10 times more product. Users knew this. They'd adapted, using more to get the same high. Their bodies had built tolerance to heavily cut heroin. Then, Frank Lucas introduced Blue Magic, 98% pure, branded in blue glassine bags, marketed as premium heroin, the purest on the street. Users who'd been doing 10 to 20% heroin for years didn't know how to adjust dosage. They'd use their normal amount, maybe a quarter gram. But 98% pure, that normal dose was 5 times stronger than what their bodies expected. Result? Cardiac arrest, respiratory failure, death within minutes. Sterling Johnson Jr., the prosecutor who called Frank's movie 1% Reality, also said this: Lucas's operation was one of the most outrageous international dope smuggling gangs ever. The purity was killing people. Harlem hospital emergency rooms in 1974 to 1975 were flooded with Blue Magic overdoses. Dr. Robert Newman, head of New York's Narcotics Control Program, documented the crisis. We saw overdose deaths increase by approximately 30% in neighborhoods where Lucas's product was prevalent. Users were dying from doses they'd been using safely for years. Mostly young black men and women, ages 18 to 35, found dead in apartments, stairwells, bathrooms. Frank Lucas knew this. He heard the stories, saw the news reports, was told about the deaths. His response? Keep selling, because each overdose death proved the product was strong, made other users want it more. That's the business model. Addiction doesn't fear death. It chases the strongest high. Nicky Barnes's 3,360-person death. Network Barnes's operation was even more systematic about destroying the community. 3,360 dealers, each one selling to dozens of users every day. Conservative estimate, each street dealer had 20 regular customers. That's 67,200 heroin users buying from Barnes's network. 67,000 people addicted to Barnes's product. Each addict had a family. Parents, children, siblings, partners. Mothers stealing from their own children to buy Barnes's heroin, selling possessions, prostituting themselves, fathers abandoning families, jobs lost, homes lost, lives destroyed. Children growing up watching parents inject heroin, learning that drugs were normal, that addiction was inevitable. These kids became teenagers in the 1980s. Many fell directly into the crack cocaine epidemic, the trauma pipeline from heroin to crack. Their children, the grandchildren of 1970s Barnes customers, are adults now, still dealing with poverty, trauma, broken families. That's 3 generations destroyed. Because Nicky Barnes flooded Harlem with the heroin in the 1970s. For profit. Why they kept purity high. Frank and Nicky weren't stupid. They understood chemistry, understood addiction. They intentionally kept purity high, not to provide quality, to weaponize addiction. Higher purity equals stronger euphoria, equals faster physical dependence, equals withdrawal symptoms appear quicker, equals customers come back more frequently, equals more money. It's a calculated strategy. Use brain chemistry to enslave customers. The heroin doesn't just make you feel good, it rewires your brain's reward system. After a few weeks of high-purity heroin, your brain stops producing normal amounts of dopamine. Without the drug, you're not just craving it, you're physically incapable of feeling normal. Every nerve is screaming. Your body aches, you vomit, sweat, shake. You need the drug just to feel baseline human, not even high, just not in agony. That's what 98% pure heroin does, creates that dependency faster and stronger than cut heroin. Frank and Nicky knew this. They were counting on it. The community cost. By 1977, Harlem was in crisis. The Amsterdam News, Harlem's black newspaper, ran a front-page story. The heroin plague, our children are dying. Community leaders organized protests. Churches held interventions. Families tried to save loved ones. Nothing worked. The addiction was too strong, the supply too readily available, the dealers too numerous. And Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes, living in luxury. Frank in his Teaneck, New Jersey mansion. Nicky in his Manhattan apartments with his Bentley parked outside. Getting rich while Harlem burned. When Barnes posed for that New York Times Magazine cover in 1977, while he was smiling for the camera, approximately 67,000 people were addicted to his product. Thousands of families were being destroyed. He knew it, didn't care, saw it as proof of success. The mafia expected some cooperation when facing 70 years or life. That's understood. But the scope, the volume, 100-plus people from Frank, 109 from Nicky. That's not cooperation. That's annihilation. The Italian mob had supplied them for years, protected them, let them operate. In return, keep quiet if caught. Frank and Nicky violated everything. Frank didn't just give up suppliers, he gave up Italian connections, money laundering operations, everything, and the Italians couldn't touch him. Federal custody, witness protection eventually, so they erased him. No respect, no acknowledgement, no place in history except as rats. Bumpy arrested, federal narcotics conspiracy. Prosecutors offered the same deal Frank took 20-plus years later. Bumpy refused, went to trial, convicted, sentenced to 15 years, served 11 at Alcatraz, never snitched, not once, released. The Italian mob welcomed him back, restored his position, continued partnership. Why? Bumpy proved loyalty, trustworthiness, honor. When Bumpy died, 1968, the mob mourned, sent flowers, paid respects. Frank, 5 years and out. Frank sentenced to 70 years in 1976, cooperated immediately. 100-plus people, released 1981, served 5 years. Bumpy did 11 years for less and never snitched. Nicky, 20 years of life. Barnes sentenced to life without parole, 1978. Cooperated starting 1982, 109 people. Released 1998. Served 20 years of a life sentence. Because he snitched. November 2nd, 2007. American Gangster opens nationwide. 3,054 theaters. Opening weekend, $43.6 million. Total domestic gross, $130.1 million. Worldwide, $266.5 million. Universal Pictures made a fortune. Ridley Scott got praised. Denzel Washington got Oscar buzz. And Frank Lucas got paid. Consulting fees for the production, percentage of merchandise, appearance fees. The movie made Frank Lucas relevant again. From 2007 until his death in 2019, Frank lived off that movie's fame. Appeared at conventions, gave interviews, sold autographs. He'd tell the same lies the movie told. The coffin story, the Bumpy Johnson mentorship, the noble cooperation. And people believed him because Denzel Washington had made it believable. That's Hollywood's power. Take a liar, a snitch, a community destroyer. Put a beloved actor in the role. Add dramatic music and glossy cinematography. Suddenly, Frank Lucas is sympathetic, relatable, almost heroic. The movie shows Frank cooperating, but frames it as exposing corruption, fighting the system, doing the right thing. What it doesn't show, the 100-plus people Frank betrayed, the families destroyed, the Italian mob connections he exposed, his own mother given up. It doesn't show Frank serving only 5 years while Bumpy Johnson did 11 for less. It doesn't show Frank getting rearrested in 1984 for another drug deal while on parole. It doesn't show the real Frank Lucas, the one Judge Sterling Johnson described: illiterate, vicious, violent. Hollywood erases all that, replaces it with Denzel's charisma. The documentary treatment, same year as American Gangster. Mr. Untouchable documentary about Nicky Barnes. Director Mark Levin gets exclusive access to Barnes in Pai. Witness protection. New identity, hidden face, disguised voice. The documentary lets Barnes tell his story his way. He frames himself as a businessman, a survivor, someone who played the game smarter than everyone else. He talks about the council like it was a corporation, discusses strategy, market share, competition. What the documentary downplays: the 109 people Barnes testified against, the 67,000-plus addicts his network created, the 3 generations of trauma he caused. There's sympathy for Barnes, understanding, almost admiration for how he beat the system. He didn't beat the system. He betrayed everyone in it to save himself. But Hollywood doesn't frame it that way. They frame it as intelligence, survival instinct, doing what he had to do. The real legends Hollywood ignores while Frank Lucas gets a $130 million movie and Nicky Barnes gets a documentary. The real legends remain forgotten. Frank Matthews, black drug kingpin 1968 to 1973. Operated in 21 states. Net worth $100 to $300 million. Matthews actually did what Frank Lucas lied about, cut out the Italian mob entirely, built direct supply chains from South America, federal indictment, bail set at $5 million. Matthews posted it, July 2nd, 1973. Disappeared. Never found, never caught, never snitched, chose to run instead of betray. 40-plus years later, still undefeated. Where's his movie? Where's the $130 million budget? Where's the celebrated Hollywood treatment? Silence. Because Matthews didn't cooperate. Hollywood can't make a redemption arc out of someone who never betrayed anyone. Stephanie St. Clair, the Queen of Numbers, built Harlem's policy empire in the 1920s to 30s. When Dutch Schultz tried to take over by force, she fought back. She hired Bumpy Johnson, waged a 4-year war, eventually forced Schultz out. With Lucky Luciano's help. She was a black woman fighting white gangsters in the 1930s. And winning. Where's her movie? Where's her Netflix series? Where's her story told with the same budget and care as Frank Lucas's lies? Nowhere. Because she didn't snitch. Because her story doesn't end with federal cooperation. The pattern Hollywood celebrates criminals who cooperate, who testify, who help prosecutors. Goodfellas, Henry Hill, cooperated, witness protection, legendary movie. The Irishman, Frank Sheeran, informant, testified, 3.5-hour epic. American Gangster, Frank Lucas, biggest cooperator of them all, $266 million. Meanwhile, criminals who followed codes, who stayed loyal, who did their time, forgotten, ignored, or reduced to minor characters in someone else's story. The message Hollywood sends: cooperation pays, snitching leads to fame, betrayal gets you Denzel Washington playing you. Loyalty? That gets you forgotten. What this teaches young people. Right now, there's a 16-year-old in Harlem watching American Gangster on streaming. He sees Denzel Washington, confident, powerful, successful, respected. He sees Frank cooperate at the end, but the movie shows it is morally complex, difficult decision, almost noble. That teenager doesn't research the real story, doesn't know Frank gave up 100-plus people, including his mother. Frank poisoned Harlem with 98% pure heroin. Frank lied about everything. Judge called it 1% reality. Frank served only 5 years while real stand-up guys did decades. He just sees cooperation equals freedom, snitching equals smart, loyalty equals stupid. And in his neighborhood, where codes still matter, where respect is earned through principle, that message is poison, worse than heroin, because it destroys the idea that anything matters beyond self-preservation. Hollywood teaches that betrayal is just business, that cooperation is intelligence, that there's no value in loyalty. That's the crime. Not making movies about criminals, making heroes out of rats while erasing the real legends. The black community doesn't need Frank Lucas. A man who lied about everything, poisoned Harlem with 98% pure heroin, gave up 100-plus people, including his mother, got rich off addiction, served 5 years for it. That's not a hero. That's a cautionary tale. The black community doesn't need Nicky Barnes, a man who built empire on black suffering, posed for magazines while Harlem died, testified against 109 people, gave up his own wife, lived in luxury off trauma. That's not success. That's betrayal. Right now, there's a teenager watching American Gangster. He sees Denzel Washington, smooth, confident, rich, powerful, sees Frank cooperate at the end. But the movie frames it as noble, exposing corruption. That teenager doesn't know. Frank gave up 100-plus people Frank poisoned. Harlem, Frank lied about everything. Judge called it 1% reality. Frank gave up his own mother. He just sees success. And cooperation as the smart move. That's Hollywood's poison. Not heroin. Worse. The normalization of betrayal. The celebration of cowardice. The erasure of honor. Epilogue. The final count. Frank Lucas died May 30th, 2019. Age 88. Natural causes. Cedar Grove, New Jersey. His obituaries called him notorious drug lord. Some mentioned American Gangster. Few mentioned the 100-plus people he betrayed. Nicky Barnes died 2012. Age 78. Cancer. His death wasn't announced until June 2019, 7 years later, because witness protection. The New York Times ran his obituary with the headline, Nicky Barnes, Mr. Untouchable drug lord, dies at 78. Called him a legend, a Harlem kingpin. Barely mentioned the 109 people he testified against. Both died free. Both avoided life sentences. Both escaped consequences, but neither escaped judgment. In the criminal underworld, both black and Italian. They're remembered as the two biggest rats in New York history, not as kingpins, not as empire builders, as informants. The Italian mob hates their memory. Harlem hates them more. Because Frank and Nicky didn't just commit crimes. Lots of people did that. They got rich off black addiction, poisoned their community with ultra-pure heroin, created generational trauma, then snitched on everyone to save themselves, 200-plus people total, then let Hollywood turn them into legends, made millions off their betrayal story. That's the unforgivable part, not the crime, the snitching, the profiting from betrayal. The real comparison. Bumpy Johnson, 11 years Alcatraz. 0 people snitched on. Italian mob mourned him. Harlem honored him. Died respected. Frank Matthews, disappeared 1973. Never cooperated, still undefeated, either free or dead, with his honor intact. Stephanie St. Clair fought Dutch Schultz, never backed down, never betrayed anyone, died forgotten but respected by those who knew. Those are principles, those are codes, those are legends worth celebrating. Frank Lucas, 100-plus convictions, 5 years served, rearrested 1984, died comfortable off Hollywood money, legacy biggest rat. Nicky Barnes, 109 people, 20 years of life sentence, witness protection, anonymous death, legacy council destroyer. Hollywood made movies about the rats, celebrated the cowards, made millions off betrayal. The real legends, still forgotten, still ignored, still waiting for their stories to be told honestly. The lesson. This isn't just history, it's a warning. When we celebrate Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes, when we make movies about them, when we call them legends, when we let them profit from their betrayals, we send a message. We tell young people, snitching works, cooperation pays, loyalty is for suckers. We tell the Italian mob, you can't trust anyone, especially not successful black dealers. They'll testify the moment they get caught. We tell Hollywood, audiences love rat stories. Keep making them. Keep paying informants. Keep erasing honor. That message destroys communities, breaks codes, makes trust impossible. Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes didn't just poison Harlem with heroin, they poisoned the culture with betrayal. And Hollywood spread that poison nationwide, made it glamorous, made it profitable. The Italian mob remembers. They'll never forget. They'll never forgive, and they'll never respect black American gangster legends who turned out to be the biggest informants in mob history. Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes, record-breaking snitches who destroyed 200-plus lives, poisoned 3 generations, and let Hollywood turn them into heroes. That's not legend, that's betrayal. If this exposed how Hollywood turns snitches into heroes, hit subscribe. We drop real mob history weekly, not the sanitized version, not Hollywood fiction, documented truth from court records. Comment below. Who's the biggest rat in organized crime history? Frank Lucas, Nicky Barnes, or someone else? At Mafia Talks, we expose the ones criminals want forgotten. The 109 people who went to prison because 2 men couldn't keep their mouths shut. Share this. Let people know the real Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes. Not Denzel's version, not the documentary spin. The truth, 2 record-breaking informants who destroyed everything they touched. And Hollywood made them heroes anyway.